The viewpoints expressed on Night Fright are not necessarily those of the host, the staff, the sponsors, or the affiliate stations. Tonight's program may contain graphic themes or images. Viewer discretion is advised.
There is a time for question. There is a time for answers. There is a time to challenge. There is a time to speculate. There is a time for change. There is a time for truth. The time is now. Welcome to Night Fright, your voice in the dark for horror and conspiracy. And now your host, Brent Holland.
Can you hear me okay?
I sure can.
Yeah. You know, I was listening. First off, thank you for having me on. Greetings.
You know, I'm so used to speaking with you. By the way, folks, this is Bill Black. And he's going to be talking tonight about the gunfight at the OK Corral. He's got some information.
Well, no, I was just you were making mention of the debate and everything, and I just threw that out as something hopefully funny. But greetings from South Lake Tahoe, Nevada, where we have 1.5 feet of snow on the ground right now.
You know,
and I do have a beverage of my choice. I do have a beverage of my choice going. So
I've got water.
So,
my nephew sent me the
there you go. Yeah, well,
I've got water.
Yeah, the Stanford tree. I see that. Yeah, they're doing well in football this year.
They are.
So yeah. Oh no, they are. They're a really good football team. But I was thinking here. I was listening to you recite out of your book from on Abraham Bolden, and I was thinking that it was the night before Christmas, and all through the house not a creature was stirring because the Secret Service was there. So anyway.
I'm ever optimistic that his story will finally be turned into a feature film. With, you know, there was some talk of Will Smith several years ago picking up the project and turning it into a feature film, because it is truly heroic. What they put him through, folks, was, I can only say it is parallel to a third world nation. It was just diabolical what they did to this man, and he fought back. And he's become one of the premier leaders in bringing out the fact that the Secret Service agents surrounding not only JFK in those days, but also right now they have this frat boy fraternity type of attitude where they all want to go out and get drunk, they want to womanize, they want to do this, they want to do that. Their one focus should be on protecting the president. And Secret Service agents, folks, even when they're not on duty, but they're traveling with the president, they're on duty. You are never off duty. So they're not allowed to drink, they're not allowed to womanize, they're not allowed to go to bars. They're supposed to keep to a strict curfew, and yet time and time again, what do we see? A Secret Service agent breaking protocol. And that puts the whole team at risk, and all that takes place inside that team, the coordination and everything else. But above all, it puts the president at risk. And the president is a father. He's got 2 little girls at home. Nobody needs to be without a father. And trust me, I know this firsthand. And this is the problem with the Secret Service. And every time there's an incident, Mr. Bolden comes out and he writes amazing things. He's truly a visionary, and he has fought. And it's time now. It is time now that his record be cleansed, because you know, he's moving on in years. He did not commit the crimes he was convicted of. At the very least, this outgoing president should give him a pardon, and there's no excuse for that not to happen. So please, if you're listening, write to your congressman, write to your senators, write to the powers that be, write to the president himself, and ask for clemency for Abraham Bolden. And just do a Google on Abraham Bolden. You're going to find lots of stuff. order his book, buy his book, or just simply go to the archives at Night Fright Show. There's 3 shows there with him, folks. 3 shows with Abraham Lincoln. You'll be able to listen there for free, or simply buy my book. I'm going to plug my book again because his interviews also in this book, along with many, many others. So, yeah, it's a fascinating story, isn't it? Bill, do you want to tell your connection to the JFK assassination through one of your clients?
Well, I will say that my quest for the truth of this started when I was about 39. So that's 20 years ago, just over. When I read a book that was written by David Lifton called Best Evidence. And being an attorney, I started looking through the eyes of one who would be taking something to court, and what evidence would be admissible and what evidence would not be admissible. And I reached out to David. I wrote him a note. I thanked him for writing the book, asked him a few questions, sent it to his publisher because I didn't know where he lived in care of, and luckily for me, they forwarded it on to him, and I got a nice letter back from him, and we ended up having dinner. He ended up coming over to my home and having dinner, and for the last 25 years, we've been very close friends. David is writing a second book right now. I'll just say it's Best Evidence 2. I think it's going to, I don't know what the official name's going to be, but, I get, he's been writing this book for 17 years, and I get updates on the chapters that he's writing. He asks for my opinion, which I'm very honored that he does that. And he's very close to finishing this. David's 75 years old, so my worries are that something may happen, and at the nth hour, and I keep telling him this. So, but that's how I came to be. David was in his doctorate, was getting his doctorate at UCLA at the time of just following the time of the Kennedy assassination, and got into this and gave up his education at UCLA and dove head first into researching what happened and began writing his book. He was set to be a aerospace engineer with what's the aerospace company that's out of Pasadena? I can't think of it right now. But
JPL.
Yeah, JPL. So
folks. NASA.
Yeah, and so he had several years ago. He still had his same apartment in Brentwood next to UCLA since 1968, and he had used it. Basically, it was an office, and they were knocking down the building, and so he had to move all of his stuff out of there. So I had a big truck, and so he asked me, he says, "Can you help me move all my stuff out of this, because I got to get it into storage?" And I went over there, and I walked into his apartment, and it was like a treasure trove. It was like walking into the Louvre Museum that was about Kennedy. And all of these photographs, and he had a 3x4 blow-up of the Mary Moorman photograph, which he gave me. It's in my office here in my home. He had exhibits from the Warren Commission. He had a Mandler Kakana rifle, which I now own, which I now have. It was unbelievable, and it took us about 3 weeks to move all of his stuff out of this apartment, and hundreds and hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of books, some of which I now have, and I hate throwing away a book. I just can't do it, but there were so many books there. So so I have a long history with David, and that's what got me into this. And I have since then have lectured on the assassination, have written some research articles on the assassination, and followed very closely. And so I don't profess to be an expert as some of the people that have written some of these great books have. But I do know what I think took place, and I do know, more than I think, 99.5% of the public knows. So.
When did you first realize for yourself, Bill, that it was indeed a conspiracy, and the government
That it wasn't?
That it was a conspiracy, and the government was covering this thing up.
Well, it would have to be, it would have to be, after I read David's book. Prior to that, I had read Mark Lane's book. I had read Joshua Thompson's book, 6 Seconds in Dallas. But it wasn't until I got into David's book.
Not to interrupt you, Mark Lane's book is
Rush to Judgment. Rush to Judgment, yeah. And then there were 6 Seconds in Dallas. And but it wasn't until David's book when he had these great chapters on the interviews that he had with these regular corpsmen that were working for the Navy at the time, and he was the first to figure out that the ornate coffin that comes off of Air Force One, it's the picture that everyone remembers, with Jackie Kennedy and Bobby Kennedy standing there, and they're lowering the coffin, that the president's body was not in that coffin. And he was able to show that, and through firsthand, you talk about firsthand interviews in your book tonight, Brent, with your book. These were just young 20, 19, 21-year-old corpsmen that were at Bethesda that also had to sign these non-disclosure agreements that, afterwards, that basically saying if you disclose what you saw tonight, you're going to be court-martialed. And a lot of these witnesses, have not, it took a long time to come forward. And so these were corpsmen that saw, President Kennedy's body arrive in a shipping casket, that they had to take the screws off, and he was wrapped in a body bag, or he was in a body bag. And that's not the way that he left Parkland Hospital. So after I read that, and these amazing interviews with these people that he tracked down, it dawned on me that, well, if that happened, then there definitely, it definitely had to be a cover up here, because it's too many people are now stepping forward. And then, after I saw the Katzenbach memo, basically, which was the marching orders for the Warren Commission, stating that the public had to be assured that there was no conspiracy, involved and basically saying, that nothing can come out with regards to any conspiracy. Yeah, that's when I realized, this was all hocus pocus.
Yeah, it sure is, isn't it? Do you think it was a coup d'etat?
Well, you and I and in fact, David Lifton have had a discussion on this. If you recall, the technical definition of a coup d'etat is a military takeover where a new leader is enshrined to run a country. In this, technically, it wasn't. By this definition, because by the Constitution, if the president is dead, the vice president takes over. So the succession of power took place the way it should take place. Now, if you want to backtrack and say, okay, but was the military involved in this? Yeah, I think the military was involved in this. If you read Douglas Horn, or Douglas Horn's book, or take a look at his video, Air Force One that's coming back from Dallas to Washington, D.C., there were a number of generals aboard that, and they wanted this plane landed there at Dulles, and have the body transferred to the Army facility there in Washington, D.C. versus the Naval facility, and they had a neuro staff on call that were all there ready to operate on the president's head and remove the bullets. All that's come forward, and the doctors have come forward saying we were standing there waiting to do all this at the Army Reed Hospital. Jackie Kennedy was Walter Reed, yeah. Jackie Kennedy kind of threw a wrench into this because she wasn't going to leave the coffin, and she was going to stay with the president's body, which she thought was in the coffin. So they had to quickly, avert everything to Bethesda. So, these generals aboard there wanted the body sent to Walter Reed, and they knew that this was going to happen. So, yeah, in a sense, yeah, there was a coup d'etat, because you're not going to have this happen, without some military intervention. And you were talking about Curtis LeMay. Curtis LeMay was in Canada at this time. He had flown to Canada, and a lot of people suspect that he was afraid that if this went south, that he wanted to be out of the country, and he flew back that night against direct orders from his superior at that time, or from I can't think of the general that told him that he needed to go to the White House, and flew directly into Dallas or into Washington, D.C., and went directly to Bethesda to watch the autopsy, and sat there smoking a big cigar during the entire time that this was happening. He was very pompous. So I know that he knew that this was going to happen. And in my heart of hearts, I know that he knew that this was going to happen. So, you don't sit in an autopsy room of the president of the United States smoking a big cigar. What is that? Well, that's the victory cigar.
That's just a pile of arrogance in that gentleman. That's for sure as hell.
Yeah.
And, to think that you could actually end your Holocaust that's insanity. That's crazy.
Yeah. But you are right in that book where all the Joint Chiefs were screaming at President Kennedy because they all wanted to invade Cuba and attack Russia, and so that has come out since, and it's just crazy. It's lunacy, to think that people were thinking like that.
Bill, you lived through those times, the October Missile Crisis, and
I'm sorry?
You lived through those times, the October Missile Crisis. What was that like at home?
Yeah, I was born in 1971. That was 1962, so I was fairly young, and but I do, I do remember, duck and cover, in your schoolrooms and everything, like you were going to be under a wooden desk, and that was going to protect you from a hailstorm, a hailstorm. But I distinctly remember I had several friends of mine in grade school at that time, in junior high, whose parents were very, very wealthy. I grew up in Palm Springs, California, who built homes with bomb shelters and outside. And they were pretty cool because you'd go into them. They had little periscopes, so you could put the periscope up and look around, And so, of course, we played a lot of Army in those things. But with regards to anything emotional about the Cuba Missile Crisis, I was just too young to really grasp any of that.
Was there concern with your parents? I suspect that it might have been that you were aware of.
No, I grew up with my mom. My dad wasn't around, and I never remember anything, from her having any concern about it. She was very private. My mother, as a side note, doesn't matter, but my mother had a divorce before I was born, and I never knew it until after she died, 70 years later. So she never would have said, she would have never showed any emotion to me that would cause me to be scared in any way. So,
what are some of the other aspects? David's book is, 500 or 600 pages. There's so much great information in there. It's one of the most groundbreaking books that was ever put out about the assassination. It has inspired so many people. Best Evidence is the name of the book. The author, of course, David Lipton. We're discussing some of his research tonight because, can I say, Bill, that you represent David? Would that be okay?
Well, you already have.
Well, I can edit it out.
Anyway, so he was very meticulous in talking to all of the doctors that were at Parkland Hospital that day, and getting their firsthand account with regard to the size and location of the wound that was in the back of President Kennedy's head, which they all refer to in one way, shape, or form as the occipital area. And if anyone puts their hand behind their head and they feel that little bump that comes out from behind your skull just before you go down to your neckline, that's the occipital area. And so he had very detailed drawings from some of the physicians and their interviews, and then also the bullet hole that entered President Kennedy's throat, the size of the tracheotomy incision that was made, because they had to put a tracheotomy into President Kennedy's throat to try and restore his breathing, and how the size of that went from a half an inch to 4 inches long. If you take a look at the autopsy photographs that now are available online, because they had to go in, the conspirators had to go in and get that bullet out of there, and so that's a widening of the incision of that tracheotomy to extract the bullet. So those interviews and that writing of all the doctors, was something that a lot of people, it was the first time that anyone had ever heard that, and this was all again firsthand. David talked to all these people, and actually spoke with the Commander Humes, that performed the autopsy, and the other doctors there that were involved in the autopsy. So you were talking about Brent, with regards to the first Warren Report conclusion versus the second Warren Report conclusion, and which is correct. The FBI originally did the investigation and came out with their report about the shootings about 60 days after the assassin, and said there were three shots and there were 3 bullets. The 2 of them hit Kennedy and 1 of them hit Connolly, and that was the story that they were going to run with until, as you said, we've got the TIG incident. But now I lost my train of thought here on this.
Well, I was going to bring up something you had mentioned to me, was the crack in the windshield for a frontal shot as well.
Well, yeah, there are at least four eyewitnesses that have come forward and that have stayed on the record that there was a bullet hole through the front of the windshield from front to back, or at least a bullet hole in the front of the limousine windshield. One of them was a doctor, an intern at Parkland Hospital, who was very well acquainted with guns, and stood there, not more than 10 feet away, and saw the bullet hole. And it's, Abraham Bolden may not think that there was any wrongdoing by the Secret Service agents, but I will tell you that the Secret Service took control of the evidence that day and night, and they whisked that limousine away to the Ford Motor place, and I want to say it was in Michigan, and they had that front window destroyed and replaced with a new window. So I think there was compliance on part of the Secret Service. Why would they do that? Why would you destroy evidence? Why would you? There's pictures while the limousine is at Parkland. There's photographs of a Secret Service agent with a bucket of water that's washing down stuff. So there's a lot of bullet fragments that reportedly were given to the Secret Service that never turned up at the autopsy. So I feel that there was compliance across the board with a number of Secret Service agents that day and night. So,
Bill, have you ever been to Dealey Plaza?
Brad, I have not, and it is #1 on my bucket list, and it kills me every year. I've been to Dallas 3 times, and on legal matters, and each and every time I was saying, okay, I've got to go, and something would come up, and I had to leave earlier than I wanted to leave. So I I'm salivating. I told my wife, we're going next year, because I know, and everybody says this, that area is so small that when you watch it, when you see the Zapruder film, that it looks like this expansive area, and the other area, the Nix film and the others, and you've been there and you've told me it astounds you as to the smallness of that area and where this took place.
The other thing I want to tell people too is what astounded me, and it's very small. It's very what's the word I'm looking for? When you're in a small room or something, and the sound just goes. It's like you're sucked into some kind of fog or something. The other thing I noticed too was, I always thought it was just a slight incline that Kennedy was on, but no, it's a bloody hill. And because of that, what ends up happening, folks, is JFK's in the rear seat, and he's elevated above everybody. So he's, his head is right there, perfect target. And whether you're shooting from the Grassy Knoll north or the Grassy Knoll south, from the Daltex building, the Texas School Book Depository, he is a dead duck, because he is sticking way above the car and way above the people in front of him, including Governor Connolly. So that's the other thing that shocked me, is how steep that hill actually is, the grade. And it was the perfect spot for an assassination to take place. You've got so many locations where people could be and escape. Just incredible, and then you get back into the false Secret Service agents that were seen and met behind the Grassy Knoll, people showing badges that they were Secret Service agents, yet we know all the Secret Service agents are accounted for with the president at Parkland Hospital. There was no Secret Service agents assigned anywhere along the route. There was no Secret Service agents in Dealey Plaza, yet we've got people claiming to be Secret Service agents in two places in Dealey Plaza, behind the picket fence, where the Grassy Knoll, and the other place is behind the Texas School Book Depository. And who ran into these people? Professional law enforcement officers. So this isn't just like me running up and somebody showing me some kind of badge and I go, oh, okay. These are professionally trained law enforcement officers that ran into these guys and were showing these badges. So this is something else that it just, people like to overlook and say, well, they were mistaken. Maybe one person, but when you've got 3, 4, or 5 reports of the same thing, I don't think so. I don't think there's a mistake there at all. So that's the other thing I wanted to refer to with people. But getting back to the autopsy, it's funny how the brain disappeared right after the autopsy as well, so that it could not be examined by anybody to try and find out where the shots were coming from. Did you read any of Lamar Waldron's book at all, Bill?
He wrote a great book, Ultimate Sacrifice. I read the entire. I've read it 3 times. It's in fact I'm holding it in my hand as we speak. I always have to have my library here in front of me when I talk to you, David, because you ask. Brent, because you asked me these questions. But it's a very thick book. It's I don't have my glasses, but it's 600 pages or so. And it's very detailed. I listened to Lamar the other day. He was on a show, and he said something that surprised me. That he must, and I don't know why he said this, but I guess he believes it. That he thinks that the Zapruder, that there is no forgery attached to the Zapruder film. And that kind of surprised me, because we have this great research that just came out from Douglas Horn, who found and interviewed a gentleman that was running the CIA Photographic Institute there in D.C., who on the night of the assassination, or the next night, the Saturday night, who arrives but 2 Secret Service agents with the original Zapruder film, which has only been seen by probably less, It has only been. Let me just put this. It has only been seen by probably less than 50 people in the world, and of course, since that time, a few more. But asking for certain slides of that film to be blown up, and then that was taken to another photographic place where the Zapruder film that you now see was created, and it was brought back the next night to different people at the CIA place, and these two groups of people that worked on it never knew that this happened. It was so compartmentalized that the original guy that saw the first Zapruder film, the original Zapruder film, it wasn't until several years ago that he viewed what is now considered the Zapruder film and said, "That's not what I saw that night. That's not the Zapruder film that I saw." So I was kind of taken back from Lamar Walden when he said that he thought that the Zapruder film that everyone sees today, wasn't falsified, and it was. There's several people that that have come forward. You can see a few of them on YouTube that have come forward to discuss what they saw on the original Zapruder film, and in fact, the news broadcaster that was there in Dallas. I can't think of his name right now. He was one of the top broadcast.
Right, the CBS guy. What's his name? Not Jim Lair. I'd already discussed him. I know who you mean.
No.
I know who you mean. It's Walter Cronkite. Oh, what's it? Dan Rather.
Dan Rather. Well, for a long time, people thought that Dan Rather was trying to cover up, what he saw, and I was one of those people. But when you listen to his interview about, and you can see it on YouTube when he talks about viewing the Zapruder film, because he was one of the few people allowed to see it. He talks about watching the limousine make the turn there on Elm Street. Well, if you take a look at the Zapruder film, you don't see the limousine making a turn on Elm Street. The limousine's coming down Elm Street. So there was a portion of that video that was removed, and if you take a look at two other of the videos that exist from the other people that have taken took videos of the possession of the motorcade, the moment that the Kennedy car gets to that corner, that portion of the film is distorted. Slides are missing, and so something happened as the limousine turned the corner that the government didn't want you to see. What it is, I have no idea. But I do know that what we are now seeing as the Zapruder film is a forgery, and there were, you take a look at the back of President Kennedy's head, at the time of the assassination, there's a mat back there. You see the back of his head is black. Well, they blacked out the explosion out the back of his head. So anyway,
did Lamar mention?
But Lamar Waldron is. I'm sorry?
Did Lamar mention his film at all? Because I know Leonardo DiCaprio several years ago had optioned his book in the hopes of making it into a feature film. And I was just wondering if Lamar had mentioned any update on that. I haven't heard.
No, he didn't. But a great historian with regards to behind the scenes leading up to it and everything else. Just so far off with regards to the Zapruder film, it caught me by surprise. But anyway, yeah, it's a great book, Ultimate Sacrifice. I would recommend it to anybody.
Did he? What do you think of his thesis on the actual hit being ordered from Sam Giancana, who's a mafioso?
Well, there's that book that came out that was written by his son or his grandson, and I could see that happening. That doesn't surprise me because of because of the problems that Robert Kennedy, caused for the mafia. So, but it would have had to have been coordinated, with the government. Yeah, the Secret Service, it controls the evidence, and the Secret Service did everything they could to destroy the evidence. So, if you're going to believe that this hit is caused or comes from the mafia, then it had to go way high up into the government to get the Secret Service to have knowledge of this, because they would have had knowledge of it. You don't go to all the you don't go through all the steps that they did to destroy and divert evidence following the shooting if you're the Secret Service. So.
The JFK Assassination, the definitive book by Brent Holland. From inside the Oval Office to Dealey Plaza, first-person witness accounts. Order yours right now. nightfrightshow.com.
What do you think about the CIA's involvement? I think they were heavily involved. Do you feel the same way?
Yeah, listen, Alan Dulles was no friend of President Kennedy after he was fired, and for him to be on the Warren Commission board is like, it's like, come on. So, the deck was stacked before, before the dice was rolled,
And, I board thing too, so.
Yeah. I can't think of the lawyer that was in charge of writing the.
Did I lose you, Bill? We're speaking with Bill Blackwell tonight, folks, if you're just joining in, and he's in Reno, but there's storm going on.
His last name was Ball, from Long Beach, California, and he was one. What's his first name, Brent?
Oh, geez, you think I could remember it? Now tonight you've caught me off guard. I should have my library.
Well, I had the privilege, and I guess I should say honor, but I'll say privilege. Joseph Ball, I went to his office in Long Beach, and this is 25 years ago or something, sat down with him. And I asked him, was there anything with regards to the assassination that caused you to wake up and have sleepless nights about? And he said, he says, yes, there was. And he says, I couldn't figure out how Oswald could smuggle a rifle into the school book depository because of the length of the rifle. He says, I was having problems with that. He said, and then one of his staff members came to him and said, well, it's screwed. You could screw it apart and put it together, and it made it shorter. He says, and that was the one thing that caused him problems when he first came aboard to start investigating this. And I looked at him. I said, well, you know what? I said that would also hold true with the photographic sight on the rifle. I said, that has to be fine-tuned. If you're taking that rifle apart, and as people want to believe that it was in the back seat of the gentleman that Oswald rode to the school book depository with that morning, and his sister, which he has basically stood up and said there was no way that there was a rifle, even if they took it apart, that package wasn't that large. I said, with the jostling and everything else, I said you'd have to tune in, the telescopic sight. And I'll never forget his expression. He looked at me like no one had ever said that to him, and his mind was like a Rolodex. It was going back, trying to figure out what I just said. And so that was a very moving moment for me, knowing that, things didn't take place the way the Warren Commission wanted us to think, but I was actually talking to someone who had researched this, was on the staff, and had written the background of Oswald, and this was something that this guy had never even thought of before. So
Bill, you're an attorney and a great attorney. There's no question about that.
I may have to raise my retainer fee.
If Oswald was to have lived, and you know what you know now, would you feel comfortable representing his interests?
Oh yeah, yeah. Well, what you know now, yeah. But even back then, the information that came out that Mark Lane came forward with other eyewitnesses saying that they saw two to three other people up on the sixth floor depository building, and the chain of possession of different things even at that time. There isn't any way that under the rules of evidence as they stand that Oswald could have been convicted. There just isn't. There is, unless it was a rigged court, and we know with Abraham Bolden that was a rigged court. But there's just no way that he could have been convicted under the rules of evidence because there was just too much tampering and of even the bullets, even in the Tippit murder, which is like one of the craziest things that takes place in all this. And in my estimation, is one of the most intriguing things of this entire thing is the Tippit murder. And you have different cartridges, and you have the sheriff's department withholding cartridges and bullet casings and this and that. So yeah, it would have been a hard press from an evidentiary standpoint to prove that Oswald was at guilt here.
The murder of Oswald
And his alibi.
Well, yeah, he was in the second.
And his alibi. His alibi holds true. I'm sorry?
And he had witnesses in there as well. So.
Yeah. So anyway, it's an intriguing thing, and it's never going to be solved. But we all know one thing is that the aftermath was covered up. There was no way that the Warren Commission was going to investigate any bit of evidence that led anywhere other than to Oswald, and so. Now it's just it's just an oratory. We get to talk about it and lament about it, and hopefully the bad thing about this is that the history books still have Oswald as the assassin, and they probably always will. It's just the way things are. But it's important that young people realize that things didn't happen the way the government wants you to think it happened. So. It's important to continue talking about this.
I had mentioned Ted Sorensen coming out and, in my opinion, confirming conspiracy. I've contacted every major newspaper here in Canada, television studio.
Oh, they won't talk about it. They won't talk about it. They won't touch it. They won't touch
that with a 10-foot pole.
Now, I'm going to tell you that at some point in time, the original Zapruder film is going to come forward. So there are people that have this original Zapruder film, and when that comes forward, because there was one individual that states that you actually see, well, there were 85 people in Dealey Plaza that said the limousine stopped for 1.5 to 2 seconds, and the fatal shots hit the president. But also what people don't realize is that the Secret Service follow-up car stops, and the Secret Service jump off the car with their guns drawn. Now, that's been verified by 2 people that I know of that have seen the original Zapruder film. So there, at some point in time, somebody that has this is going to come forward and show this, and it is going to rock everything. Okay, and hopefully it happens in my lifetime. But that exists. So.
Wow.
And the individual even says you can see the bullet holes hit the stem and sign. That stem and sign was replaced. Why was it replaced? Because there were bullet holes in the stem and sign. So, and for people that don't know the stem and sign, that's the sign where you see President Kennedy go behind and then exit from with his hands up, to his throat. And in the Zapruder film that you see today, that's a falsified sign. They have put in the reconstruction of this they put in a different type of sign, but it's still but the original sign, you can actually see the bullet. According to the people that saw the original Zapruder film, you can actually see bullet holes hitting that and sparks flying off of it. So amazing stuff.
Well, and from what's great about your perspective is it comes from a legal perspective, which is something that we don't get often. And this is important because, as you said before, you look at the stuff that would prove one way or another the conspiracy. And everything that you've mentioned tonight, from your perspective, proves a conspiracy.
Well, Brent, I've read the depositions of. I haven't read all the depositions that were taken from the Warren Committee. I probably read 90% of them. They took a lot of depositions, but in the great thing about the JFK movie, when you see Kevin Costner sitting in bed and he's reading the depositions and he's saying, "Ask the question, ask the question." Okay. Well, I understood what he meant. There were follow-up questions that needed to be asked that weren't asked, and those follow-up questions to the witness weren't asked because if they were asked, it would have taken them down that dangerous path that there was someone else involved. And so that was very riveting to me when he was saying that, because I fully understand, and someone who doesn't do depositions, who doesn't read depositions, may not have understood the importance of that. But that was key in that movie when he's sitting there saying, ask the question, and the questions weren't asked by the various, attorneys assigned to do the depositions.
Do you think those attorneys were doing that on purpose in order to manipulate the outcome of the...
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Oh, they knew. They knew. They had their marching orders. As I said, the Katzenbach memo said that there shouldn't be any evidence presented that leads the American public to think that there were conspirators involved in this, and so they had to dovetail it. And those guys were accomplished attorneys. Any other case, believe me, there would have been a lot of other questions answered, but this was something different, and they had their marching orders.
Bill's
coming out of law school would know that, so.
Many years ago, Bugliosi did this made-for-TV miniseries.
Oh, okay.
I was going to ask you.
Don't get me going on Bugliosi, okay?
What was it called? Oswald on Trial or something like that, if Oswald had a lift.
Yeah.
And, Bugliosi took the prosecutor's part and found him guilty. Did you ever see that?
Oh, I did. I thought it was done very well. The attorney from Wyoming that had never lost a criminal case in his life, I can't think of the gentleman's name right now, was the defense attorney. And, they actually had the witnesses there. I mean, they had people that were there, and so if anyone gets a chance to see that, I thought it was done very, very well. If you and I are talking about the same thing.
Yes.
So, yeah. So
the outcome had already been established, and for the TV show, the script was.
Probably so. I'm sure they weren't going to do that with the jury coming in saying no, he wasn't guilty. But the testimony on that, they even had Ruth Payne, on there. Interviewed her. She was a witness on there. I thought it was done very, very well. But. Don't get me going on Bugliosi, because I don't want to say anything ill about somebody. At least not tonight.
That's passed away.
Oh my gosh!
Here's a guy that's done good work in other areas.
Yeah.
I think.
But I will tell anybody that's listening tonight, if you go on and Douglas Horn, who is the foremost authority of all the photographic evidence of what took place in Dealey Plaza that day. If you Google him and go to YouTube, he's got several very, very good videos of the assassination and research that he's done, but specifically with regards to the forgery of the Zapruder film, which is something that's relatively new. The gentleman just came forward, or they found him. Not that he was hiding. He just didn't realize that there was a problem. And it's done very, very well, and that should have splashed on every media outlet in the country after they did the interview with him, saying, "This is not the Zapruder film that I saw, and that's not the headshot that I saw, and there's something amiss here. So.
And yet, once again, mainstream media just glosses over all this stuff as if it's meaningless. But it just keeps piling up and piling up and piling up and piling up. At one point, it's going to fall over in their lap. They're going to have to deal with it. That's my view.
Well, I'm telling you, when the original Zapruder film surfaces, it is going to cause a hailstorm, and it will happen. We see all this stuff that comes out, and people that you never knew existed are coming forward. And as you said, Brent, a lot of these people are 80 years old or older. But I'm telling you, the original Zapruder film is going to surface one of these days, and when that happens, it's gonna change the entire picture of the Kennedy assassination.
We've only got a minute left here, Bill, but you know about Sherry Feaster's work. She feels that the frontal shot came from the south side of the knoll.
Yeah.
Do you feel that her research, would you be comfortable using her research as proof for a frontal shot?
Well, I have not had the opportunity to read her book, but I know that she's a qualified forensic investigator. And there are some individuals that have placed a shooter at that location. So so knowing nothing else, I'm sure that there's some credibility there, because I've seen some other people that have corroborated the location as to where she has the shooter. And for those of you that are listening, she has the shooter. If you're looking out of President Kennedy's limousine straight ahead, she has one of the shooters to the far left of the bridge that they're going under from across the street. So which would be across the street from the Grassy Knoll, for a better explanation. So
an easy exit too. It leads right onto the highway. They could just jump in the car and take off. And again, there was a fence line there as well, hidden by bushes, I might add. What would be your main smoking gun if you were defending Oswald, to say that it was impossible, he couldn't do it?
Wow, this main smoking gun. Well, you know what? There are 3 policemen that are on the 6th floor of the depository that have written declarations that the gun that was found was a German Mauser. So right off the bat, you've got a German Mauser that's found, not a Manley or Carcana, and these are from 3 police detectives. And if you know Roger Craig, who was came forward and was ended up being murdered. They said it was suicide, but he was murdered by the Dallas Police Department. But there were 3 different Dallas policemen that found that rifle. And clearly stenciled on it said Mauser.
So we're going to have to start to wrap up, Bill. But listen, thanks for coming on the show. It's everybody thinks that Bill's a great researcher in his own sense. He knows so much, as is evident from the past hour. He's not just another pretty face, folks. This guy's not.
Well, I'll let my wife know about that. But one of these days, I'm going to get an autographed book from somebody. There you go. So
you take care. All the best, Hanch.
All right. Thank you, Brent. Thank you for having me on. I appreciate it.
You're listening to Night Fright and your host, Brent Holland. The time is now. Your voice in the dark for paranormal and conspiracy.
The JFK Assassination, the definitive book by Brent Holland. From inside the Oval Office to Dealey Plaza, first-person witness accounts. Order yours right now, nightfrightshow.com.